Hello, everybody. I'm Howie Hawkins. I was the Green Party and the Socialist Party candidate for president in 2020. And this podcast, Green Socialist Notes, is about continuing to educate and advocate for the eco-socialist program that my running mate Angela Walker and I ran on in 2020. And today we have back Nidal Bitari, who we had on our program in March 16th, to talk about the Palestinian and Syrian freedom movements. And that was on the occasion of the 11th anniversary of the uprising in Syria. With the war expanding in the region since March, it seemed like a good time to bring Nidal back to talk about the current situation. And just to reintroduce Nidal, he's a Palestinian refugee who grew up in the Yarmouk refugee camp in Syria. He participated in the Syrian uprising in 2011 and is active in the Palestinian freedom movement. He's now based in DC. He's with a group called People Demand Change, which is an international development and aid organization that works with civil society in the Middle East and North Africa. He earned his master's in political sociology at Damascus University in Syria in 2010, and then managed an Iraqi refugees program until January 2012, and then moved over to Lebanon to work as a project coordinator in the Arab NGO Network for Development in Beirut, Lebanon. And while he was there, he also worked as a journalist and researcher with National Public Radio's Beirut office and with other news outlets and websites in the Arab world and the US. And we'll put in the chat a link about an article that Nidal wrote about his life in a politically active family of Palestinians in Syria. And that'll give you more background on Nidal when you get a chance to read that. So welcome again, Nidal. Why don't you start by just giving us an assessment of where we are today in the region, particularly after Israel has just assassinated the leaders of Hamas and Hezbollah. You know, Ismail Haniyeh in Iran, which was bold, Yahya Sinwar this week in Gaza, and about 3 weeks ago, Hezbollah's leader, Hassan Nasrallah. So it's a volatile situation. So what do you think?
Well, thank you, Howie, for having me again, and it's always a pleasure to be with you. And thank you for having me again on your platform. I really appreciate it. Well, where we are now, we are still in a war, and it's just like it growing more and more to be ugliest and to be more bloody over and expanding to across the region. I have to say that when Hassan Nasrallah was assassinated, I think it was very bold, as you said, and also it was a sign of to what extent this Israeli government would go. And I would say that assassinating Hassan Nasrallah in Beirut is way more dangerous than assassinating Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran. Although I understand the rationale behind people thinking that the Israelis just breached the sovereignty of Iran, but the symbolism of Hassan Nasrallah in the not only in Lebanon or in Palestine, but also in the Arab world is significant. The only time that I would really remember that Hezbollah and Hassan Nasrallah started to, or we thought that they are losing their popularity in the Arab world, was during their participation in the war in Syria, and I would say, and because I experienced it firsthand, that Hezbollah really committed a lot of massacres and war crimes against Syrians during the war in Lebanon, especially in the western in western Syria and Homs and along the borders with Lebanon. So this is something established. However, due to the complexity of the war in Syria, and and how it divided the whole world, not only the Syrians. So Hassan Nasrallah per se did not lose his reputation and his popularity in the Arab world. So his assassination fell hard on the Arabs across the region, especially the movements who still believe in axis of resistance. And we've seen a lot of demonstrations in support of mourning Hassan Nasrallah in Tunisia, in Syria, of course, in Jordan, um, like everywhere, I would say, in the Arab world. So that was a tough thing for the supporters of axis of resistance to swallow. And I think it took Hezbollah's war with Israel to another level. And let me just explain a little bit. I'm not going to go through details here, but I want to say something about Hezbollah and the symbolism of Hezbollah in Lebanon. Hezbollah is the only party that took or pulled out the Shiites in Lebanon from their misery, because historically they have encountered a lot of injustice, and like especially in after the independence in 1943. So the Shia in Lebanon, they started this movement through their leader Musa Sadr, who was later disappeared and kidnapped and disappeared in Libya during Al-Gaddafi era. So the movement of that Sadr started in like earlier in Lebanon, I think it was like maybe mid 60s to like and lasted until Hezbollah was formed in early 1982 or 83 in Lebanon, in the context of the civil war and in the context of the war of against the Palestinian camps in Lebanon. So Hezbollah, since its establishment, it was established on the basis of supporting and defending Palestinians. And it grew more and more, and it gained this power that made that the strongest Shiite or maybe party in Lebanon in general, and one of the most and one of the strongest military groups in the Middle East, or if not across the world, to be honest with you. So I find it very hard for Lebanese. Like I don't want to like to keep emphasizing the Shiism of Hezbollah, but I would find it very hard for the Lebanese who support Hezbollah and supported by Hezbollah to take to forget about this or to let it go easily, because they are now in power in Lebanon, um, and that I don't think that they will give up this power easily. So that being said, I would say that Hezbollah will keep fighting Israel, and it would take, and I don't think they really have limits for their fights. They have rules now they established since they started attacking Israel after October 7th in support of Gaza. The limits or we will not kill civilians for now. I mean, like Israeli civilians. And I think there is a rationale behind this decision, um, that is connected to what happened on October 7th. Because on October 7th, a lot of Israeli civilians were killed, 700 by Hamas and and its fighters, and about 200 to 300 were killed. That we knew, or we learned later by they were caught in crossfire between Hamas and the Israeli army. So the total of the civilians who were killed on October 7th is high. And because in the history of the Palestinian or Arab Israeli struggle or war, I do not really recall that I have ever read in the history that there has been this level of civilian Israeli or Jewish civilians were killed in the history of the wars and battles between Palestinians and Israelis, between Arab and Israelis. I tried to find, like, throughout the history, if there were any massacres were committed to this, like, large mass killing like this. I did not really find. If I am wrong, I wish, like, I'd like, please let me know, or like introduce me to some sources that, if like people who are listening to us, they know about that very issue. So Hamas really went out of the Palestinian tradition in the fights against the Israelis in this attack, with this mass murder of Israeli civilians. Um, and Hezbollah, I think, and because this mass murder was the only thing that really the whole international or the world was talking about, yeah, I think Hezbollah learned this lesson, and until now they are keeping this balance of, you're hitting, if the Israelis will hit Beirut, will hit Tel Aviv. If the Israelis hit this, like, tit for tat, like, and so, but not the civilians. So I don't know to what, for until when this will last. I think Hezbollah will reach a point where they will escalate more with the Israelis. And what's today? Today is the 19th of October, Saturday, October 19th, 2024, when Hezbollah tried to attack Benjamin Netanyahu's house in Caesarea in Israel, and they hit his house with a drone. And he was in there. And now the Israelis are preparing to react to this, what they call it, assassination attempt. Um, for the murder of Sinwar, uh, the murder of Sinwar actually is very interesting, uh, because I don't think it's gonna impact the Israeli decision to stop the war. Although this is the wishes or the wishful thinking of Biden administration and Harris today, that this is the opportunity to stop the war. And we have heard a lot of leaders here in the U.S. and in Europe, including in Germany today, that they are encouraging the Israeli government to stop the war, and to call it a day, by bringing Sinwar to justice, as the media and the Israelis are promoting it. However, I don't think that this war was escalated to this extent that we're seeing today and killed 42,000 Palestinians, mostly children and women, and killed until today about 2,300 Lebanese civilians, and could escalate to a regional war with Iran. I don't think that the Israeli government, this right wing Israeli government, is thinking the way that we here in America think, or in Europe think. No, they think that this is for Netanyahu to start with. Uh, I am almost 100% sure that had he known that this group of Israeli IDF soldiers who were there in Rafah uh, by accidentally, and they killed Sinwar accidentally. Had he known that they would be there and kill Sinwar, I think he would have stopped them, because I am 100% sure that he does not want to kill Sinwar, because he does not want to end the war, and he does not want to have the pressure of the international community on his shoulders to stop this war. And this is driven by two reasons. The first one is personal for Netanyahu, because he doesn't want to go to jail. And the second one is that today the Israeli community is leaning towards supporting Netanyahu and his and the policies of Netanyahu and his government. And I am not quite sure to what extent the Israeli community or the Israeli society they really want to or support ending the war. And I'm talking about by and large the supporters of Netanyahu. I understand that there are liberals and there are anti-war movement in Israel, but I think they are turning to be now minority and oppressed and suppressed by this government, by Netanyahu and his ministers, Smotrich and Ben Gavir, and all these right wing personnel around him who are really leading this war. And also, if we look at the structure of the leadership of the Israeli army today, they are almost all of them are the hawks of the Israeli government. They really want to go to war and stay in this war. The only issue that I really until now like this lingering question uh, is to what end? Because they what triggered this war is the revenge, and maybe we all understand it, but now it's going to another direction. We are talking about the new Middle East um, that Netanyahu is promoting or trying to shape or reshape the region according. But I don't think that he has any idea what he wants to do, and I don't think that the Israeli government has a goal behind this war, and I don't think um, that they really know where they are going now, or what the Israeli government and the Israeli army doing now is just destroying everywhere, killing everywhere, regardless, and doesn't matter where and when and how. Um, which brings me um, to the point about the questioning the U.S. policy and towards this struggle or this fight, and um, and also the European policy, the EU's policy, and like towards this struggle. So we have a lot of explanations and theories explaining the US, why the US is supporting Israel. One of them is like capitalism, one of them the imperialism, one of them is the security, the national security interest. Um, but there is one that we really don't talk about, which is the ignorance. I think the US policy towards Israel is taken or driven by traditional policy that has been established since 1948, when the United States supported the establishment in Israel and voted to for that in 1948, and after that, and like just like the same policy, just supporting Israel no matter what. And it might sound like a mean or a stupid joke, um, what I am about to say now, but when I was in Berlin a few weeks ago, one of people who I met, and he was like wondering about the U.S. policy and um, in the Middle East, and wondering more about the love and support that Biden shows to Israel. He said the following. He said, "I feel if the state of Virginia launched a war against Israel, the U.S. government will support Israel against the state of Virginia." And this gives you an idea about the impression that people have about the US government, the current administration, and how they are headed toward justifying every single thing that the Israelis are doing, regardless uh, of the price and the consequences of the support. The support that turned the US, unfortunately, into like an isolated country in the United Nations and around the world. I do not know and never met or been in a situation where I felt um, that the US is welcomed due to the US policy and in the Middle East, and to the unconditioned support to Israel. Um, and we have two main issues here. We have, I think it's important to talk about when it comes to the U.S. policy towards this very issue, the war between Israel, or the three things actually. The first one is, I do not understand the U.S. emphasis on the two-state solution and finding a final solution to this struggle or fight between the Israelis and the Palestinians. And let's remember that almost 30 years ago, 31 years ago, uh, Palestinians signed Oslo Accords with the Israelis here in the White House in Washington, D.C. in December 1993. And I would take the opportunity here just to clarify something and remind people of something. People would mistakenly say Oslo Agreement, but Oslo was a declaration of principle for a future agreement. So basically, what was signed back then between PLO and Israel, between Rabin and Arafat, was they agreed to agree in the future under the protection and the patronage of the United States. But what happened, and now we are in the future, 30 years later, and all the foundations and the principles and and motivations, to be honest with you, for an agreement between Israelis and Palestinians that would lead to a Palestinian state are gone. The settlements are increasing day after day, and they ate 60 to 70% of the West Bank. The checkpoints are like more than 600 checkpoints in West Bank that is restricting the movement and the mobility of the Palestinians. That is now it's like made the whole West Bank under occupation. The current war in Gaza that made the Israelis reoccupy Gaza. So I don't know in what sense there would be like a state for the Palestinians, while like it's completely dismantled. All the foundations and principles that would help to establish this state were dismantled. Um, so I don't know why the U.S. government is like emphasizing this idea that is impossible, and they are trying the same, using the same tools to trying the same attempts to reach a two-state solution every time, and they fail over and over and over and over again. Moreover, the situation gets worse. Um, so I all like when I have the chance sometimes to talk to officials in the US government, State Department, or other, I say like I think now maybe we have to focus more on peace, regardless of the shape of the future statehood of both the Israelis and Palestinians. Um, and I go through lessons from history that Jews and Palestinians lived together for a long time, and the Jewish people lived among Arabs for a long time, and it could peacefully, and it could happen again. And I always remind people that the Holocaust did not take place in the Middle East. It took place in Europe. So the possibilities for to find a solution for these two people to live together are possible. And, but I don't think that there is willingness or understanding to the current situation. Honestly, that might be like surprising, or like it count, or it would sound sometimes unrealistic. But seriously, sometimes I feel that the US administration does not understand the situation on the ground, does not understand the dynamic of the Israeli and Palestinian fight. They does not understand um, the reasons behind this struggle. And unfortunately, it feels sometimes that the U.S. government is an Orientalist historian who is or politician who is trying to describe the situation on the ground and their own words, and it fails, and it makes the situation on the ground worse over and over and over again. Um, so this is the first part about the policy. The second part regarding I mean the approach. The second part is like this baseline of the US policy, that the most important thing in the world is the security of Israel, and to protect the security of Israel, anything else is a collateral damage. And in this sense, they supplying the Israeli army with more and more weapons is just making fueling the war more, and making it worse, and it's not helping the like paving or even starting to talk about peace between or about ceasefire to start with. Let's talk about peace later. To talk about ceasefire now, despite that the IDF breached every single article in the international humanitarian law and all the rules of engagement and the war rules, and every single international community rule that was put after World War II to protect civilians was completely breached by the Israeli government that would make the IDF um, uh, like on a level of violations that is unprecedented in the history since World War II, which is scary. Well, I mean, when we talk about this, like when I pronounce these words, like I feel scared. Um, because it's like it's not because like of the current level, because when we say World War II, we it triggers the fears of a nuclear war, or and like an escalation does not have limits. And I think this is the scary part of it, that the US administration until today is not trying to stop, and is not does not really understand the mentality of Netanyahu and his right wing government. Um, so whenever like, and I understand that there is another side to the story, that there is Hamas and Palestinian factions and etc. But like, let's really be realistic and be neutral for a second and compare between the IDF and Hamas. I think it would be like a very surreal and stupid comparison between between the both sides. One of them is a militia, and the other one is a state army equipped with the most modern equipment in history, not in the world, in history. One of the strongest armies in the world. So this the revision of where we stand today and what the U.S. government is doing is very important, and it is very important to reevaluate our belief in human rights and the law that the United States created after World War II. Where does it stand today? As I said once on your show, uh, like does not feel that there is double standards. Feel that there is a standard for each case by itself. Syria was in this context. Today, Palestine in this context, and Ukraine in another context. So as long as we are not unified or unifying people, the world around the ideas that the United States created after World War II. So now we will be heading toward a place that I read. I don't know where. I cannot even like think of where we're headed now. Let alone the upcoming elections and whether Trump wins. Uh, this is very dark, and I really don't want to go there, um, because I still feel that there is hope, and this hope comes from the U.S. administration itself, like from the government itself, because it might sound a little bit weird, but at some like sometimes I feel that Biden does not represent the administration and how people think in this administration. When you meet people who really believe that what he's doing is wrong, and when you see that people are leaving the administration like Josh Paul and other officials who left the administration because of their principles and because this government is violating the rules that and the regulations of the U.S. The U.S. government itself. I feel that there is still hope, and I feel that there is that the change is still possible. inside this government, and we should not lose hope. Just we should keep pushing this administration as much as we can to change the rhetoric and to change its policies in the region. Uh, the last thing regarding this policy, it's kind of an example. Um, Sweet bitter example, as I would say, that the United States is the largest supporter and funder for the United Nations Relief and Work Agency, UNRWA. That the only agency that supports the Palestinian refugees. And as you may know, and the listeners know, there are Palestinian refugees even inside Palestine, in West Bank and in Gaza. And um, some numbers say that uh, 80% of the refugees, the population in Gaza are refugees. According to my numbers, they are about like 65 to 70%. Um, and UNRWA is the backbone of the Palestinian educational system. If it collapses, the whole education system of the Palestinian people inside and outside Palestine collapses, because from grade for the grades 1 to 9, UNRWA provides 60 to 70% education to or like as a ratio of the Palestinian education system or structure. UNRWA contributes to 60 to 70% of it. So when the United States government decided to stop the funding on UNRWA back in the end of 2023, or maybe the beginning of 2024, I don't remember the exact date. I don't really know what they were thinking. Because if there is any pride the United States should take, is creating one of the most significant success stories by funding and supporting UNRWA. The Palestinians, they have the highest rates of education on every single level, and indicator that the UNESCO and the millennial goals of the 2023, 2030 millennium goals, like set by the United Nations, the Palestinians are almost on the high end and of success when it comes to education. And this is all because of UNRWA, that the United States is the largest supporter and donor to it. And the United States put a lot of help and support to make it successful as it is today. And I am proud that I graduated from these schools. I studied from my first grade to the ninth grade in UNRWA schools, and I studied 2 years of college in the only on UN college that is designated for Palestinian refugees. So I find that it was one of the most dire mistakes that the United States government and Biden administration uh, did, that they stopped funding UNRWA. That is like, I really don't understand it, to be honest with you, and I don't understand the rationale behind it. Like they said, the Israelis, they provided a narrative that UNRWA supports or has what's called terrorist members and terrorist groups who are also teachers or employees by UNRWA. This is really ridiculous argument. This does not really reflect or even not even close remotely close to reality, and to understanding the socio-economic structure of the Palestinian people inside Palestine and outside Palestine, let alone accusing people who are uh, employees and teachers on UNRWA, that they are terrorists or members in terrorist groups. I would really remind and that the Israelis themselves and the world that UNRWA is, especially UNRWA in Palestine, in West Bank and Gaza, is the only maybe schools and education institutions in the region, in the Middle East and North Africa, who have in their in their curriculums uh, is designated curriculum about human rights and nonviolence and nonviolence. Like they teach kids human rights and nonviolence. Like this, these are the schools of UNRWA. So, and I would not. I maybe we will need like a whole episode, like just to talk about the impact that UNRWA had and still having on the Palestinian society in Palestine, outside Palestine, and also in diaspora. So these accusations are really, really ridiculous, and it shows again the double standard when, like, for this government, when they deal with violations of human rights, despite the Israelis violated every single article in the international humanitarian law. They are still supported by this administration, and supplying them with all necessary weapons to kill every single Palestinian and Gaza. It is really unbelievable, and I really don't have words to to explain it. It's just like make us look here in the U.S. as we are complicit in this war, and I am afraid that we might be. Um, and this will have really dire impact on the image of the United States and in the world. Um, People do not perceive the United States the same way that they used to perceive it before the war in Gaza. It really impacted the image of the United States significantly negatively around the globe. And I don't think we should be surprised, because like here inside the United States, we've seen like a lot of movements, um, especially the movement in campuses and in the universities that is against the U.S. policies in the region. Um, Finally, uh, I still believe that the United States is the only power on earth that can and has the leverage to stop this war. But uh, when this administration would start using this leverage, I don't see it coming soon. Uh, and I don't think that Biden himself will take this decision as long as he is in the White House. The only hope that we would have is that Kamala Harris would win the elections and she would change these policies. Otherwise, uh, this will not go well down in history for the United States at all. Uh, and definitely, it is not helping the peace process in the Middle East, and definitely making the situation and deepening the pain uh, of Palestinians and Israelis, as well as because I don't really want to talk about the Palestinians, the pain of the Palestinians in this war, and not talk about the Israelis, because like it's a war, and there is not a good war, and there is not a secured and safe war, and there is not a an iron dome that would protect civilians from what's happening, and from any future, or any escalation in the future. Um, Finally, I really um, I will tell you this story, and I close with it. Um, my father's father, my grandfather, left Palestine in 1948 because a militia member, a Jewish militia, I think it was either Argon or Haganah, I am not sure, killed my great aunt's husband. So my grandfather got mad, and he killed the Haganah or Argon militia member who killed his fa- brother-in-law, basically, and then he left Palestine in 1948. And but between 1948 until late 1950s, 1959, 1960, my grandfather used to smuggle himself from Syria, where he lived, to Nazareth, where he was born, to meet his mother, my great grandmother, and to meet his sister and his nephews and nieces. And his route from Damascus to Nazareth went through Lebanon sometimes, and through Jordan sometimes. But regardless, whichever route he took, for like 11 or 12 years, he always told me that people who helped him to reach Nazareth were his Jewish friends, who he knew and lived with before 1948. Um, and and also my mother's mom, my grandmother, who was a teacher in Nazareth. She is originally from Safad, but she was teaching in Nazareth uh, when Nakba took place. Um, and the narrative that she always used to tell me about how surprised and shocked and sad she was when she knew that her Jewish neighbors in Safed were participating in the ethnic cleansing in her neighborhood. Um, so this sentiment of um that Palestinians and Jews were always enemies. Like it's not uh, true in history. There is another story and another narrative. Although yes, there is colonialism happening, there is expanding for settlements, there is whatever. But you know what? I think it's time for both, like especially for the Israelis, to come and approach Palestinians and tell them, yes, we came here in 1948 and we kicked you out, and we are sorry. How can we start again together? Because this is the only way for both people to live together. The Palestinians will not get rid of the Jews, and the Jews will not be able to get rid of Palestinians. We like there will be always Palestinians and Jews in that region, and they have to live together. In the United States and the West in general, who is fueling the war today in between Israelis and Palestinians should realize this fact and reevaluate their policies and start a new chapter that could lead to serious peace, not peace like that based on politics and games.
Well, Nidal, that laid out kind of dismal trends, but gave us hope at the end, and particularly, what we need to push the United States to do. Arms embargo, fund UNRWA, and let's get peace, and then we can talk about a political solution. But
Yeah,
war, you don't talk, you shoot. So we do have some questions in the chat with what little time we have left. Why don't we get to some of those?
sure.
And so they'll come up on the screen. We need critical thinking. Ask, will BRICS in the future benefit Palestine or Israel?
Well, the BRICS, I don't think that is going to benefit Israel or Palestine, to be honest with you. The BRICS is just a symptom of how sick our international community system is, and it's a production of this, of the current injustice and in the world. So I don't think that the BRICS will benefit Palestinians, nor is gonna benefit Israelis. This is from, like, if we are talking about from political standpoint. But if we are talking from a technically, BRICS does not strive with democracy, does not strive with human rights. The only thing that would make BRICS work and thrive is having more dictatorships in the world, because BRICS is only one of the consequences of the Belt and Road Initiative, and also the war in Ukraine, which does not really have any considerations for human rights and justice in the world. And I would encourage whoever asked this question, I would encourage them to go and read about the impact of BRI and BRICS on Far Asia, especially on Cambodia, and how it's dismantling the socioeconomic structure of many countries. And also, it's just maybe it would be like another tool for some dictatorships, especially in the Arab region, to survive. If the United States at some point realizes that, or the West in general would realize at some point that, okay, we have been building alliances with the Arab leaders, maybe it's time to build alliances with the Arab people, because these two things, you cannot really put them together in one trench. They are completely against each other.
Yeah, let me add to that you have to understand that the BRICS countries talk left but walk right. They say they support the Palestinians, but economically they're supporting Israel. South Africa and Russia are Israel's biggest coal suppliers. Brazil is its biggest oil supplier. India sells weapons to Israel. This is all since October 7th.
Right.
And BRICS, who did I leave out? China has record trade with Israel in the last year. So I'm going to put in the chat, or Chris is going to put in the chat, an article by Patrick Bond, who's a South African political economist. And he wrote a piece in ZNet called The Blessings for Genocide. Nearly all BRICS plus regimes nurture Israel economically. And so a lot of people think, oh, BRICS is the counter to US led Western imperialism. But if you read Patrick Bond, who's really studied this, the BRICS countries are trying to move up the hierarchy of global capitalism, not change the system.
I agree with you. No,
Yeah.
no, I didn't. I was not answering the question from the sense of the economy or changing the economic. So I was more like answering from the sense of peace. Like, would Russia and China bring peace to the region if they take over like that whole region? No, I don't think so. For the very reasons that you're saying, and I agree with you 100%.
Here's another question from Chris Blankenhorn. In my state, there's a big push for our state governments to divest from Israeli bonds. Since October 7th, my state, Illinois, has invested $300 billion in Israeli bonds. This is likely true across the country. In addition to our federal government arming Israel, our public institutions are heavily invested in them across the board.
Well, I mean, there are like the ties between Israel and the United States like are really intertwined, right? Like it's a long history of collaboration and coordination and cooperation, like on every single level. And this is why in the Middle East, people would like say that Israel is the state 51, like in reference to the states here, like 50 states here in Israel. But um, I think there is like the fundamental issue of or regarding the U.S. policy towards Israel. The very fundamental issue is the approach toward the conflict itself. Not what America is doing with Israel and how it's supporting it, but the whole approach of this conflict is needs to be really needs to be under revision 100%. Otherwise, we're just living illusions here about the role of the United States and world peace, and or contributing to the peace in the Middle East, um, regardless of the economic institutions that are collaborating between here and Israel and the U.S. support to Israel, like, because when we change the system thinking of the government here and make them understand the dynamic on the ground and how the United States is impacted negatively by this conflict, I think this will be the starting point to realize like a new approach. Other Because for now, honestly, I feel uh, that the U.S. government's approach or policy towards Israel is driven more by the ideological perspectives and ideas of Biden himself, not the U.S. government per se. Um, and this is why I am hoping that Kamala Harris would like first would win, because if she doesn't win, it's going to be a huge disaster for the globe. And if she wins, that she will have a long list of things that she has to change in order for this earth to survive. Otherwise, we are really on the edge of a cliff, and Trump would really push us right down there.
Vicky Corden, I have the impression that Netanyahu will continue the war just to remain in power. Netanyahu is corrupted and could be hiding something, like the corruption charges against him.
100%, 100%. Like the incentive of Netanyahu to launch um, this war is just to stay in power. I don't think Netanyahu and the Israelis themselves now they realize that he does not care about the Israeli citizens. He does not care about the hostages. He does not care about the security of Israel. All what he needs is the security of himself and to stay in power, and to not go into jail.
Andrew Hager, if you have time for one more question, where do you stand on this belief I've preached during the escalation of the war? Peace will never come between Israel and Palestine until someone agrees not to fight.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, like, this is what I was really like. This is what I was saying, that there is no winner in this war, and like it's like because the price of it, like the loss of lives and etc. It's painful, but this is not how you measure like winning or losing a war. You will measure the outcomes of the war of its results, and the results of this war will not be anything good for the Israelis nor for the Palestinians. And a war, uh, I don't know how to put it, but let me say this. You know that there is like this sentiment against this chant that Palestinians they would chant in the demonstrations, and it's being taken as anti-Semitic chant, like from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free. Um, but from the river to the sea, if these two people do not agree that they can live together, these wars will continue, will not stop. The issue, though, is yes, we have a right-wing government, and we have Hamas on the other side, but also we do not have a real supportive international community, and this is why I think that the U.S. approach to this conflict and to this war specifically does not help and will not produce the peace process. It will produce more wars and battles on the ground and more hate between these two people. I think we will have to start thinking, and it is, and I know that so many Palestinians will like accuse me of so many things now when I say that, um, and also Israelis. But I think we will have to start thinking of the people who live in that piece of land as one instead of two people. And this is the only way to produce and peace. Um, I'll tell you, like to answer, like I think I just remembered one of the my friends who's from Gaza and whose family now is in Gaza. I met him last month in Europe, and he is freaking out and he cannot sleep, um, because he's worried about his mother and his father and his siblings and his nephews and nieces and etc. And because of um, the hell that they are living today in Gaza. Like, so I kept checking on him and asking him since October 7th and until I met him last month in Europe, and he said, like, you know what, Nidal, I think people should realize that they really don't care today, people in Gaza, they really don't care today who governs them. They really do not care who's gonna be like the president of Palestine or the prime minister of Palestine, or who's gonna be like, whether it is Netanyahu or Abu Mazen, Mahmoud Abbas, or Sinwar himself. They really don't care that much anymore because they see all these people and personnel as elements of war, not peace. Um, and this will just show you how people feel on the ground today about, like, despite all the more of the killing that the Israelis did, and the killing machine that they worked in Gaza. I think that Palestinians still have uh, uh, they are tired of war. I mean, war is tiring. It's very easy for us, like, to sit outside and lecture and talk about it, but war itself is tiring. Is It is tough to sleep and do not know whether you will wake up or not on the next morning, because you have no idea where the missile would land. Uh, and so imagine that people have been living this feeling for almost a year now, who are surviving. Um, so I don't think that the Israelis want to live like this, nor, and I'm sure that the Palestinians do not want to live like this. And I will close with this testimony that a woman from Gaza gave the other day on Al Jazeera, when she said, I don't understand this war, and I don't understand why it's important. I'm changing her words a little bit, but I'm giving my understanding of what she said. I don't understand why this war is happening. Why I don't understand why it's important. All what I want is to live a normal life, and for my son to find a job, and then to go to his job and to come back home, and then to find a beautiful girl for him, and get him married, and then I see his grandkids. This is all what I care about, and I understand why I cannot live this life. And, like, so I think this is where people are. This is where their mindset are. This is where uh, the Palestinian people in general are. And I really don't. I encourage, and myself included, like, to really not think of the Palestinians as all of them as Hamas, or they are Hamas, all of them are Fatah, or whatever. I mean, because this does not help the understanding, like, us to understand the conflict on the ground.
Okay, Nidal, I really appreciate you being on here, and I hope people, took note of what you were saying. I mean, my takeaway is, what we can do about it is, you basically said the U.S. is a linchpin here in terms of getting peace, and we got a long way to go. I think you're right. We're more likely to get a response from Kamala Harris than Donald Trump. But even if it's Trump, there's going to be an anti-Trump movement, and the linchpin in terms of U.S. policy is not all in the president's hands. Congress can force the president's hand. So we need to put the pressure on Congress, although we've got a long way to go. There are only 17 members of the House, and I think 3 members of the Senate supporting the resolution that the U.S. follow its own law, that we don't give arms to human rights violators, and therefore cut off the arms to Israel for these wars. Funding UNRWA is sometimes raised, but it was put into the last omnibus spending bill that funded the last year government, that UNRWA gets no money. So these are issues that we can bring up in our congressional districts to our members of Congress. There's a couple of weeks left in the election. You can even make sure they have to deal with it now. And then it's a 2-year election cycle. So, we can start raising it right away, getting ready for the next election. So there are things we can do. So with that, Nidal, I probably have you back on again when we see where things are in a little while. I just want to tell folks that next week I will be in the country of Georgia observing a very fraught election, where if the ruling Georgia Dream wins, they're going to ban the other parties. And it may be a disputed election. It's kind of a warm-up for what we may have in the United States, because we won't know the result on election night if it's at all close. because Pennsylvania doesn't even start counting the early ballots and the absentee ballots until election, after the day after the election or election day. So, and we know what Trump's going to say. He's going to say he won no matter what the vote was. And there are 170,000 Republicans organized to go to polls and harass people, and 40,000 armed militants ready to do something if Trump gives them the word. So get ready for that. But anyway, I'll be in Georgia, and I hope to have a Georgian to talk about their election next Saturday. The following Saturday and the following 2 Saturdays, I'll be in Ukraine, providing moral support to people there. I'll be talking to Greens and socialists and climate activists. And then I go on for the next 3 weeks for short stops in Warsaw, Berlin, London, Prague, and Paris. And, you know, if I'm not traveling on a Saturday, which I think the only one I will be is 4 weeks from now, I'll be on a train from Berlin to London. But I will be recording interviews with these activists I meet. And so maybe Chris will have to post a couple of those interviews instead of me being on live on that one Saturday. But so anyway, coming up, we'll have people involved in the green and left movements in Europe and talking about what's going on there, which is not only concerning there, but also concerning the Middle East. Nidal and I were talking about, you know, what's going on in Germany and the way they regard this and how they regard U.S. policy toward the Middle East. So there'll be plenty to talk about. So that's what's coming up. And thanks again, Nidal, for coming on.
Thank you so much.
We will see everybody next week at the same time, which will be about 11 o'clock in Georgia in the night, or maybe midnight. I'm not sure. But anyway, see you next week.
Safe trips. Thank you so much.